Hi guys, it's Anya. Like so many other people at this time of year, I've been doing quite a lot of introspection recently. I like to do this, particularly in the month of October, kind of moving from the autumn equinox into Samhain. And I think even though I was only doing a formal kind of practice within the past year, and before that for many years I really didn't have any kind of formal spiritual practice at all. But I think anytime I came round to thinking more about spirituality and going within a bit more and being a bit more philosophical, I suppose, anytime that I was in that kind of place in my life, I've always found a great pull around this time of year to do that kind of thing. Of course, I mean, the time of year and the lengthening nights and the increasing darkness, I think that there's something quite natural about it as an impulse. It's quite natural to feel that need to release, and we're spending an awful lot more time inside, and there's just a lot more opportunity, I suppose, for really thinking deeply about life and ourselves and start to make some sort of internal changes now that we're sort of past the hustle and bustle of the summer months and indeed the early autumn months. So I started doing a little bit of shadow work, which is something that I've never really done kind of officially before. I've always done lots of journaling. Now, I will say that journaling is something that kind of fell away from me a bit after I went to university, but I basically got myself through my teenage years by doing an awful lot of journaling and introspection, and it's definitely I definitely have a great tendency for maybe too much navel gazing at some times. But I think apart from just the kind of universal reasons why we might feel like doing more introspective work in the sort of the descent into the dark part of the year and the descent towards Christmas time, apart from those reasons which I think are quite universal, I think also the fact that my birthday is on Halloween or Samhain has something to do with it as well, because to me, obviously, a lot of people, a lot of Wiccans, a lot of pagans, a lot of witches consider Samhain to be the new year, which comes from the Celtic tradition, or well, certainly in Ireland. I'm not altogether sure, but I sort of dislike using the term Celtic in a sort of general or all-encompassing kind of way. So I'm not actually sure which exact countries actually tended to see Samhain as the new year, but certainly in Ireland during the Celtic era. I can't say spiritually that I've ever really particularly gone along with that idea. I've never kind of consciously thought that really rang true for me. I actually quite like the idea of the new year starting at the winter solstice, at the darkest point of the year, when the light is sort of tipping back into growing lighter again. But actually I realised over the past couple of years that, and then maybe as I get older as well, my birthday is starting to have a greater significance for me, and I realised that rather than looking back at years as, oh well, that was in 2010 or that was in 2006, I will tend to say, oh, that was when I was 17, or I had a really good year the year I was 23, that kind of thing. And I suppose as well, the academic year starts not too long before my birthday, and particularly in university. We generally didn't go back to university until around the middle of October. So it kind of lined up quite nicely, that new beginning, new year kind of lined up quite nicely with my age. And I would tend to say, you know, when I was in 6th year in school, I was 17. You know, I was actually 16 for 2 months of it. But I think although the calendar year for me, and I like the idea of being refreshed for January, you know, end of December, the winter solstice, and that does have quite an effect on me. I often will have quite a turning point energetically and kind of in terms of practical things in my life around the winter solstice, but at the same time I think I've kind of overlooked the importance of sound for me and that sort of changing age and things definitely start to change, and there's definitely an awful lot of introspection that happens for me at that time of year. So as part of this kind of shadow work that I've been doing, and as part of the general introspection, something that I often find myself doing around this time of year is reading back over old diaries. I haven't gone back that far. It's really just one particular diary that I started about a year and a half ago. Because I haven't really been journaling that much over the last couple of years, as I said. Since January of last year now, I got myself, or actually I was given as a present, a diary that kind of, it's supposed to be a day planner. It has a page kind of for every day. And I started writing in that quite religiously. And even if I don't get round to writing on the actual day itself, I will go back and fill in the days. I kind of like having that push to documenting my days and ups and downs and that kind of thing. It definitely makes me feel better to have that there. But I went through quite a lot of years where I really didn't journal much, and even at the time that I started this new journal, it was kind of when I was starting to really pull together my spirituality into something more coherent. And I started to journal a bit more then. But even then, I mean, I'll show it to you. It's I'm only to here, and it's not that big a journal, and I've been using that since May 2012, so you get an idea of how infrequently I've actually been using it. But anyway, I've been reading back over that, and there's various kind of things in there, and some of it is introspection, but some of it is kind of more academic, you could say, and it has a couple of thoughts and musings about questions of the theory behind my spirituality, and also how that might tie in with my more general, I suppose, philosophy of life, and how it might all kind of tie in to academic leanings, academic research, academic study, and kind of academic, an academic thesis, you could say. One major thought that I've had kind of running through the entire process of my spiritual evolution, which is on the more theoretical, philosophical side. I suppose you could say that there are two sides to my spirituality at the moment. There is the side that is kind of more practical and personal, and which is all about bringing together my rituals and my meditation, and I've recently started yoga, but that's a whole other story. I might do a video about that. And then there's the other side, which is a lot more academic, a lot more theoretical and philosophical, and that's the academic in me coming out, and that's also me kind of thinking about how I might actually at some point maybe write a semi-academic book about this, or even do a PhD or something like that. It always comes back to that for me, and things kind of stem from that. So I have the two things kind of balancing it. That's kind of how I tend to go about things in general. But one of the core ideas in my more theoretical academic kind of side of my spirituality has been the idea of strengthening the self and strengthening identity, and the idea that some form of spirituality or storying of the cosmos is necessary for a healthy sense of identity and a healthy sense of self. It kind of all ties in together as well with that idea of finding your own story, that I find to be so important and really so central to everything that I really believe in. That idea of, and I've talked about this in a couple of videos before, I think, the idea of that it's very important for us as humans who now understand that we are in the centre of such a vast universe, and it's very important for us to be able to link ourselves to that and understand, or attempt to understand, where our place is within that, and to really try to bring the whole of our understanding of life into our day-to-day lives and into our day-to-day sort of mythology, you could say, and the stories that we use to understand the world around us. I mean, certainly there's a huge dearth of mythology and symbolism and all that kind of thing within modern society. I think religions are starting to fail somewhat, and they're not quite aligning with what an awful lot of people understand the world to be. Particularly religions that insist on staying quite literal. An awful lot of Christian religions, for example, insist on a very, or in fact, I think the official line in all Christian religions is a very literal interpretation of the Bible, for example. And this really runs across the entire scope of world religions, I think, or most of them at least. It's definitely problematic. I think there's going to have to be a change, and there's going to have to be maybe a new direction that we go when it comes to finding our own place in the universe. And religion to me very much is a storying of the universe, a storying of cosmos. And when I say storying, obviously I just mean I'm using story as a verb. I don't know how familiar some viewers might be with that usage of the word. It's a fairly academic usage, I suppose. I just like it a lot. I think storytelling doesn't really quite have the same vibe to it. It doesn't have the same power to it, I think. But that's essentially what it is. It's just a kind of a storytelling or mythology, you could say, of life, which I think necessarily includes science, includes everything that we have come to understand about the world, and includes also really importantly includes mythology and symbolism and things that aren't completely rational or completely in line with that very sort of scientific way of looking at the world that has become so prevalent in today's society. So yeah, one of the major ideas I had was kind of all about questions of how this affects people's identities, how this affects the sense of self, and I suppose you could say your ego. And to me it started to become very important that this kind of spirituality or this kind of storying of the cosmos, it became very important that ties in with the person's sense of identity, that it ties in with a sort of I would say strengthening of the ego, in the sense that it's providing a better context. It's sort of allowing the individual to really, I suppose, pull together all the different things that they understand about the world, and pull together all the different ideas and thoughts that they have, at the same time acknowledging the cycles of the universe and the earth that are going on around them, not just ignoring them, acknowledging them, and in that way coming to a better understanding of what it is to be human, what it is to be me, within all of that. But when I was reading back over this, I kind of had a thought that a lot of this kind of runs quite contrary to an awful lot of, I suppose you could say, New Age thinking. I think the Buddhist idea of relinquishing the ego has really permeated quite a lot of not only New Age thought, but an awful lot of Wiccan and pagan spiritualities. It's becoming quite common now for me anyway, reading blogs and I suppose reading books and whatnot on various pagan, to put it loosely, pagan paths. It's becoming quite common to suggest that happiness can only be found with the release of the ego. Now, I mean, there's an awful lot of variation when it comes to this. A lot of people will say that there has to be a balance, that the ego is very important, but that equally it's important to delve deeper, to have a look at those things that the ego might be covering up, like the shadow, and that you can't really just build up the ego without having a look at everything else as well, that it's dangerous to really just focus on the ego. And this was all something that for some reason I hadn't really thought about when I was initially thinking about the issues of identity and strengthening identity, and how that's all very important. Now, I do want to point out that I'm really not that familiar with Buddhism, and I'm not hugely familiar with psychology and concepts such as the ego and other Freudian concepts of how the mind works and all of that. I haven't done a huge amount of reading in those areas. I mean, all of this is stuff that I want to read about at some point, but my reading list is pretty massive. It's getting to the point where it's quite intimidating. So I haven't quite got there yet, and whereas I have read a little bit of Jung, and stuff like that. Certainly the amount of reading I've done on psychology is definitely nowhere near what I would like it to be. And Buddhism is really something, again, I'm very interested in it, but it's something that, again, I haven't quite got to when it comes to reading and exploration. So I suppose I don't have a perfect, by any means perfect idea of what relinquishing the ego is really all about. Maybe one of the reasons I've never really gotten into Buddhism, I've never really explored it that much, is because it kind of makes me a little bit uncomfortable in that, like so many other world religions, it seems to me to be all about transcendence and trying to get kind of above and beyond the here and now and the physical realm, and sort of diminishing the value of that, diminishing the value of Earth, of the current, of the physical manifestation of cosmos. And to me it's very important. It's just as important as anything that is transcendent, anything that is eternal, anything that is kind of beyond or before cosmos, or our current physical manifestation of cosmos. The two things are very important to me, and I kind of am rubbed up the wrong way a little bit by any spiritual path or religion that focuses solely on one over the other. For example, an awful lot of naturalists really only focus on the physical manifestation. They don't really tend to go any further than that, because the physical manifestation and the here and now is really all that science is addressing. It's all that science can address. Anything beyond that, anything more eternal or more ethereal or anything like that, is it's purely philosophical, I suppose. But I definitely like to find a balance between the two. I'm very interested in things like the core of silence, the core of stillness within the all, and everything that comes before, the contradiction between the idea of that which comes before, which is always there, but at the same time is not there because it was there before anything was. All that kind of tangled kind of thinking, I really love all that kind of thing. So I definitely like to find a balance. So I suppose that could be why I've never really explored Buddhism that much. But now that I'm getting more into meditation and things like yoga, which again, I had a thought the other day, is yoga in any way related to Buddhism? I don't actually think it is, but there's something in my head telling me that there might be some sort of link. Obviously I know that yoga originates from India. But I'm going to have a look into that, because I don't really know if there's any actual formal link between the two. But now that I'm getting more into things like meditation and mindfulness and that kind of thing, I think it's definitely time for me to start looking more seriously at Buddhism. And it's definitely more at the forefront of my mind then, things like the relinquishing of the ego, letting go of the self, and becoming at peace with the all by doing that, by letting go of all the trappings of physical manifestation. So I suppose the point I wanted to make is that, although definitely at the core of my beliefs is the idea that the spiritual path I'm building, it's all about identity and the self, and finding that core of self and finding how it interconnects with everything else. And to me it's very important to find that core before you sort of start going way out there into eternity, into the eternal cosmos. I think we suffer a lot from drawing back from using stories and mythology to understand our world, to understand the universe. I think our identities can become quite lacking because of that. It's just integral to the psyche. It absolutely is. Like the collective unconscious, whether or not you believe it in the collective unconscious exactly as Jung lays it out, it's pretty much undeniable that there are certain patterns and thought processes that are pretty universal throughout the human species. At the end of the day, we all come from that one common ancestor when you go back far enough, and we've all evolved to have the same kind of impulses when it comes to really sort of orienting ourselves within Earth and within the universe. And feeling disconnected from nature, disconnected from everything else, is a huge problem. I suppose maybe that too is basic to the human experience. Maybe as soon as we experienced consciousness, maybe that started to become an issue, because maybe consciousness in itself is what makes us feel separate to everything else. And I suppose it's probably not a particularly natural state to feel that constant separation. But I think we need to find our feet with that. I think we need to find a way to feel that separation, to acknowledge that separation, to say, yes, this is me, this is what I am, while at the same time understanding how we connect with everything else. So I think that does need to come first. That kind of separation between me and everything else, I think that does need to come first. I think maybe first and foremost we need to get to know ourselves. We need to know ourselves quite intimately, and I suppose we can never stop getting to know ourselves. There's always more there in the unconscious to be digging into. I think that process will not and maybe should never stop. But yes, I suppose in my mind, the first thing, in order to sort of achieve a sense of peace with the world, peace with ourselves, and a sort of sense of contentedness and happiness, I think we need to start with ourselves, definitely, and just take the time to get an inner dialogue going and just get to know ourselves and know who we are, what we want, what our deepest desires are, and really take a look at ourselves. After that, we can start looking outward. We can start looking at how the seasons make us feel. We can start actually paying attention to the different seasons, paying attention to the year as it goes by, to how we feel as the light is waning, how we feel as spring is starting up again and the leaves are starting to come onto the trees. Really think about how that makes us feel, and also think about how things like science make us feel. When we watch a documentary about anything in the universe, about the solar system, about our galaxy, about things beyond that, about black holes, how does that make us feel? How do we connect with that? What does it make us feel about ourselves? And then also when it comes to things like mythology and stories, and I think it's so important, really so important for us to at least say read fiction, if not actually pure mythology. Read fiction and think about what we like to read and why we like to read it, and what is it that it stirs within us, and what is it within us that connects to that. Because if we're reading something like fiction or mythology and we're connecting to it, it's speaking to us in some way, then I think it's probably a good idea to think about why that might be. What is it within you that is reaching out to this idea? What is it that it's sparking within you? But then with my realisation the other day, I kind of realised that maybe it's a bit premature to just draw the line there. You know, once you've found yourself and found all those things in life that are meaningful to you, and really got in touch with what's going on around you, and what you think about what's going on around you, how you personally understand it. Maybe then it is time to start thinking about how you can, in various ways, start to let go of that sense of self. Start to let that evaporate back into cosmos. And I suppose this is something that I've always been doing, I just never really thought about it. When I do ritual, I do first kind of anchor myself, not only on Earth, but as part of the human species. I think about all my ancestors, and then I kind of expand my thoughts outwards and outwards until I get to the entire cosmos and the entirety of existence. But once I get there, I definitely reach a point where what I'm doing is not so much bringing it all in and going, yes, this is me, I'm standing here on Earth, and this is everything that is around me. I stop being the centre point, and I stop sort of differentiating between me and everything else, and it starts to become quite explicitly starts to become more about feeling the way in which I am the all. Feeling the way in which I'm not just locked into this physical body, that I'm not simply the cells that make up my body and my brain, that there's more to it than that, that I am absolutely connected to everything around me, and that expands out and out and out to the entirety of existence. And I suppose when I do that, what I'm doing is I am letting go of my ego. But I suppose maybe first you need to be solid in yourself before you can start to do that. I wouldn't say I've perfected it by now. I wouldn't say that I've got there. When it comes to meditation, I guess that is what I'm aiming for. I've never really thought about it like that before, but I guess when I meditate, and I will just say, when I do ritual, I usually meditate at the centre of it. Once I've kind of done all my, I suppose you could say, invocations, once I've done all my little observances and lit the candles and all of that, I do tend to do either a short meditation or quite a long meditation at the core of my ritual. And that meditation is all about releasing the ego and connecting, feeling that connection with the all. It can be about letting go of the conscious mind and all the hustle and bustle of it, but it's also about feeling where those thoughts are coming from, kind of feeling them coming in, arising in my mind, and seeing them for what they are, and feeling how the entirety of my psyche transcends that there is more to me than just these thoughts that are kind of flashing up in my head, that there's more to me than just my ego. So it's not only about integrating with my unconscious and all the other parts of my mind that don't quite fit in with the ego, or that the ego can sometimes be sort of squashing or sitting on. It's not just about connecting with the rest of me, it is also about connecting with all of cosmos, because to me, I am all of cosmos. Everything is intertwined. Everything that I do affects everything else around me, and I am made of particles which are the same as everything else around me. So yeah, in that way, I suppose I kind of come full circle and I start to let go. I think it's interesting that that's where I'm getting to now that we're in this dark part of the year, and I'm kind of working on releasing and doing shadow work and thinking about introspection. It's funny that although all the kind of introspection and shadow work and stuff, it's all about kind of getting maybe a firmer grip on who you are and your self-identity, and it's definitely about transcending the ego and going within into the shadow, into the unconscious, and really getting to grips with the entirety of yourself, which I suppose when I talk about identity, it is about that. It's about getting to grips with the whole you. But it's interesting now in the dark part of the year that I'm starting to have that realisation of how important it is to me to feel connection, not just as myself, strictly myself, but just as a part of the all. I'm starting to release that sort of rigid idea of the sense of self that I feel like I need to have, I suppose. And it reflects that cycle that I seem to have brought about within my whole practice of sort of bringing it in and developing the sense of self and then releasing it back out. I hope that was interesting to you guys. I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.